Welcome to the Choose FI Radio Podcast, Episode 9, Travel Rewards, How to Travel the World for Free.
You're listening to Choose FI Radio. The blueprint for financial independence lives here. If you're looking to unlock the secrets to financial independence and early retirement, you're in the right place. Stay tuned and join a community of like-minded people who are getting off the hamster wheel and taking control of their lives in the pursuit of financial independence. Choose FI, your home for financial independence online.
Okay, so welcome, Brad, back to the studio again today.
Hey, Jonathan. Very excited to be here as always.
Yeah, this is going to be a lot of fun. So this is an episode that we've been teasing for a while. It's one we've been very excited about, and that is the world of travel hacking. And I am very fortunate to be doing this with Brad because he is really an expert in this space and has been doing it for a long time, has built several businesses around this model, and has been sharing this information with, what is it, hundreds of thousands of people? At least thousands.
Yeah, I mean, certainly tens of thousands.
Tens of thousands. So I wanted to start off just by telling you a little bit of a story and how travel hacking has improved my life in the hopes that it might give you some ideas about how it might help yours. So my wife is from Zimbabwe, and she lives with me in the United States. And there's some implications for that. Because her family is still overseas, it is important to us that we go visit them on a regular basis because she's living here, but we don't want it to be a situation where we never get to see them or we only see they come to us because we're living on a budget. So from the start, Danny and I decided that we were going to set aside a certain amount of money every single year to go visit them. And these tickets to Zimbabwe are incredibly expensive, running anywhere from $2,500 upwards of $3,000. And that's for an economy seat. And so that's for one ticket round trip. And we would need two of those. So this is not something that we can do every year. We would typically set out to save $3,000 a year. And every 2 years, we would take a trip back home to visit our family.
Right. So we're talking $6,000, which is probably more money than most people save in a lifetime, literally. And that's every 2 years you're dropping on plane tickets. So just to paint the picture here, that's huge dollars.
And this was my plan. I was settled with this plan. I wasn't excited about it, but I was very grateful that she married me. I definitely married up, and that was going to be what we were going to do. And when you're paying for a trip like this, these are obviously with post-tax dollars. So in order to save $6,000, you've got to earn close to $10,000.
Yep.
And then I heard Brad on the Mad Scientist podcast talking about travel hacking. Now, I had heard of travel hacking before, but to be honest with you, I was a Dave Ramsey guy, and I kind of just ignored it as probably something that people did that were really reckless with credit cards.
Right. Credit cards are the devil, according to Mr. Ramsey.
Yeah, they are evil. And so I just ignored them and had my one single credit card that I got my 1.5% cash back on, and that was basically it. In the meantime, Brad was teaching people how to travel the world for free.
Yeah, that's a perfect segue. So, I mean, essentially with travel hacking, which I don't love the term, I generally call it travel rewards, but I think the general term is travel hacking. So we'll go with that. But you're essentially taking your smart credit card habits, which is more or less paying them off on time and in full every single month, like hopefully everyone out there listening is doing, and earning massive sign-up bonuses on new credit cards. So you're opening very targeted and specific credit cards that come with, let's say, a 50,000 point or mile bonus. And you're just directing your regular spending. That in Jonathan's case, he has this rewards card that he's getting 1.5%, which is pretty decent for a normal card. But instead of using that card, he's just going to use a new card for 1 to 3 months and direct his normal spending there when he hits what's known as a minimum spending requirement. So an example of that would be open up this new card, spend $3,000 in the first 3 months, and get a 50,000 mile bonus. So that's like the general way that you would hear these offers phrased. So what that means is he's putting his normal spending on $3,000. So that's an average of $1,000 a month, which for a family, certainly a family like mine, $1,000 unfortunately is pretty easy to come by in spending.
Yeah, no, if you have $300 to $500 in groceries, you have a few recurring bills like cell phone bill, that sort of thing, any discretionary spending, it's very easy, at least for most middle-class families or even entry-level middle-class families, to hit that $1,000 a month of regular spend.
Yeah. So, and of course, I need to say it again, you are paying them off on time and in full every single month. So that $3,000 is just a cumulative figure. So if you happen to hit that in the second month, you spend $1,500 a month on average and hit the $3,000, that would be enough. It would trigger that 50,000 point bonus. And then for most people who are into travel hacking, you're going to move on to a new card because all the value is in that initial sign-up bonus. So in many cases, and we're going to show you in Jonathan's case, it's going to be worth even more. But in many cases, out of each bonus, you're going to get $500 to $1,000 worth of value. So that's for putting, let's say we'll use the upper bound. We'll use the $1,000. If you put $3,000 in and you're getting $1,000 in free travel, that's like getting a 33% rebate on your $3,000 spend, right? Which sure as heck beats the 1.5% that Jonathan was getting on his original card.
And I don't want you to think that this is this really complicated thing that you need to have to figure out. It is probably the simplest thing in the world. All I do, I just put my food and my gas and a little bit of discretionary spending on a particular card that I've signed up for. I use that single card exclusively until I've done. So I never have cash. If you ask me for cash, I'm never going to have it. I just spend on that card until I'm done or nearly done. And then if I'm in that phase, I'll go ahead and pivot and open up the next card. I'm not in a rush as long as I complete the minimum spend requirements in that certain amount of time. And if you live a very frugal lifestyle, even below what I live on, and you don't have enough expenses to run through the card, you still have some options that you can do without spending any extra money. You can plan your minimum spend around a big purchase that you have coming up. You can use the card to pay your property taxes or your income taxes. And if you're close, but you need a little extra boost, you can just purchase a gift card to a store that you would normally go to, like a Costco or a Target. And this is going to allow you to hit that minimum spend without really increasing your cost of living. But remember this is the critical part. The credit card companies win if you spend more than you would normally and you keep a balance on your card. And they're winning a lot because you see how big their buildings are and how small our houses are. You win if you restrain yourself and you just move your normal spending to hit these bonuses and then you move on. You never keep a balance on the card. You always pay it off on time and in full.
Yeah, that's great advice. And just to piggyback on what Jonathan was saying, another thing you could do for the ultra frugal people, people with resources, is potentially prepay bills. I've seen people prepay a year worth of their electric bill or some such. And my wife and I, we spend money at Amazon.com fairly frequently. So we'll buy gift cards to Amazon just on the website, and it instantly says a gift card balance. So little things like that. Now, naturally, you don't want to prepay $3,000 in Amazon. But if we're talking a couple $100 and you're going to use it in the next 6 months, all right, that's not a terrible idea, certainly.
I really wanted to come back to the point that Brad made a second ago, talking about your return on investment, because I think we kind of breezed by that. That was incredible. I don't know if you latched onto that, but when I do my normal spending on my normal MasterCard that doesn't have any of this attached, I get 1.5% back. So for every $3,000 I spend, at the end of the year, they send me a check for $45, something like that. But if you heard what Brad said, he said that if you do it the way that we're describing right now, when you spend $3,000, you're going to get a $1,000 bonus essentially for doing that. That is a 33% rate of return. You can't get that anywhere. And if you were to get it in, a taxable investment account, you would have to pay taxes on it, right? This is 100% tax free. That is incredible.
Yeah, it's amazing. And just to kind of tease what we're going to do here in a minute, Jonathan is looking at an upwards of 50 to 70% return on his Zimbabwe trip. So just stay tuned here once we get through the intro. But 33% is not the upper bound by any means. I mean, I've gotten instances where I've gotten well over 100%, actually. I got on one particular card, my very, very first card, I got, I think, over $4,000 in free flights for a credit card that we put $2,000 of minimum spend on. And that's a 200% return. That is outlandish. I mean, it's for no expense. We just put our normal expenses on this credit card, paid it off. It cost us $0, literally $0. And we got $4,000 of free flights that we were going to pay for anyway. So it's very similar to Jonathan's instance. This was me flying back home to New York to visit our family. We were going to take these flights. So this is not made up travel that we were going to do just for fun. I mean, we were flying these routes anyway. So that's $4,000 in my pocket. And like Jonathan said, that's after tax. So it's like getting a $6,000 raise because I decided to open up one credit card. So the sky is the limit for this.
Wow, that's cool. And as appealing as this is for anybody, even entry level middle class, this should be even more appealing for your big spenders and your people that are in high marginal tax brackets. For instance, let's say you make six figures and you fall in a 25% marginal tax bracket. So you have to add on to that your state, FICA, Medicare. You could easily be approaching a 40% marginal tax. And for you to spend $5,000, $6,000 on travel each year, you are going to need to earn $7,000, $8,000, or $9,000. But if you just use the techniques that we're talking about right now, you're going to do that for free. And you're going to keep all of that money available to you for other resources. So I'm convinced, and obviously Brad's convinced. Hopefully, if you're not convinced, you're at least listening a little bit closer to hear, what's the catch, right?
Yeah, and I think that most people have that question, right? Anything in life that sounds too good to be true generally is. I'm a pretty skeptical guy, pretty conservative financially. I'm a CPA, so we're trained to be skeptical and conservative. I tried to poke holes in this. I mean, I researched it for dozens upon dozens of hours trying to find, okay, what's the catch? And honestly, I'm 6 years into this. I have yet to find the catch. I think most people are worried potentially about credit rating. I think that's people's first question. And I guess my answer to that is kind of twofold. So first, it would be there is a very minimal impact on your credit score. In my anecdotal experience, and also, like we said at the outset, I mean, I've worked with many, many thousands, tens of thousands of people at this point. I've yet to find that one person even one single person to come back to me and say, hey, Brad, you screwed up my life. My credit score dropped 200 points. This is a sham. I simply have not heard that. Your credit score is going to go up and down just naturally within 10, 20 points, just within a normal month anyway. Most people don't understand how credit scores work, but let's say you haven't paid your bill yet that month and you have a $2,500 bill outstanding. At that point in time, your credit score might be 10 or 15 points lower than it would be the day you paid it, just because of what's known as credit utilization. So your score does go up and down. This is not like a very precisely fixed number, but just to talk about myself here for a second, I can give you exact numbers. So when I started travel hacking in early 2011, my credit score was 797, okay, which is pretty darn good. That's, a maximum.
Yeah. Well, 850
is the max. I would highly advise people, and this is my second part of the credit score answer. I'll get back to this in a minute, but I would highly advise you only doing this if you have a 700 or more credit score. We'll talk about that in a minute. But yeah, my credit score at the lowest point it dropped was 25 points. 772 was the lowest it ever dropped.
Which, if you just looked at that in a vacuum, 772 is amazing, right?
Yeah, you'd be very, very happy with that. That's going to get you any loan, the best rate on any loan you could possibly apply for. So for my life, that drop of 25 points was irrelevant, 100% irrelevant. I didn't care. I didn't bat an eyelash. I mean, I've earned at this point somewhere over 2.5 million points and miles, which I estimate, at a decent valuation are worth about 50 grand in free travel. And that's after tax. So probably $75,000 in pre-tax money. So I was very, very fine, obviously, with a 25 point
I will
drop.
trade 25 points on my FICA score for 75 grand in free travel.
Yeah. I think most people would out there. And the cool thing is that score jumped right back up. So right now, the very last time I checked my score, I think it was an 815 or 816. I forget precisely, but I'm actually up now almost 20 points on where I started. And this is 2.5 million points and miles later.
Wow.
So yeah, not too
But
shabby.
that really actually makes sense though. Cause we one of the things you do when you're doing this, or at least when you're doing it the way Brad and I are doing it, where you're talking about it to other people, you really want to know what are the actual factors that are involved. And when you dig down in the weeds, there's 5 of them that come into play. And I know one of those, at least initially, that maybe, gives you that slight decrease of that bumpers is the hard pull. And that's what, like a 2 to 5 decrease?
Yeah, I think that's the guaranteed drop, is when you apply for a credit card, there's a hard inquiry on your credit score. And yeah, people say it's about a 2 to 5 point drop. So that's a guaranteed thing. But that very, very quickly drops off your credit score. It's only temporary. I think you'll start seeing the lessening of that within a couple months, and certainly within 18 months, it'll be completely gone. So Again, largely irrelevant in my opinion, but yes, that is essentially a guarantee that your score will drop about 2 points for each credit card you apply for. Now, that kind of just real quickly gets into my second point, which was if you're worried about your credit score and every point matters, then I would advise that this is not the strategy for you. If you have a 701 credit score and you desperately need to keep it above 700 for some reason, whether that's psychological or you're applying for some loan and that's the threshold, then listen, don't get into travel rewards. Don't get into travel hacking. This is not your thing. Now, like my wife and I, when we had nearly 800 credit scores when we started this, we sat down and we actually had a conversation and we said, okay, if our scores drop even 50 points and they're 750, does that matter to us one bit? And the answer we quickly came to was no, it matters nothing.
You know the funny thing about that? You know who does not care about FICO score at all? It's Dave Ramsey. In fact, he will tell his audience, don't worry about your FICO score. It's an I love debt score. It doesn't mean anything. And so, if you could take just the one half of that, he would actually, that would almost make you seem like this would be a good thing for you to do. On the other half.
Is that the clickbait from this? Dave Ramsey loves travel hacking.
Yeah, Dave Ramsey should love travel hacking. But there are probably a couple people that shouldn't do it. And if you have
clearly
poor credit rating, then this is not for you. If you use your credit cards to make it from one paycheck to the next, this is not for you. If you're about to apply for a large loan like a mortgage and you can't withstand a 20, 30, 50 point decrease in your credit score, this probably is not something for you. But for those of us who are listening to this, who are living and breathing this stuff, if you're living beneath your means, you've implemented some of the other life hacks that Brad and I have discussed previously, like crushing your expenses, and you can go through some of the ideas that we've come up with. But basically, if you're living beneath your means, if you're good with credit cards, you pay on time and in full every month, you don't need these credit cards to make it from one paycheck to the next. You can crush this game, and we're excited to show you how. So hopefully you're convinced, and now you're asking yourself, how do I get started?
All right. So yeah, we're going to talk about some of the best cards in the travel rewards world, and we're going to talk about what Jonathan affectionately calls the Chase Gauntlet.
Yes, okay. Yes, I came up with that.
Yeah,
that was me.
He's trying to trademark this. So if you hear the Chase Gauntlet beyond the confines of Choose FI, it's all Jonathan.
Yes, that was Choose FI trademarked.
All right. So the reason why the Chase Gauntlet exists is Chase, in my estimation, has probably maybe 70% of the tip-top, ultra-valuable travel rewards cards. There are other banks, certainly American Express has some decent ones, Citibank, Barclays, Capital One, but Chase is really the be-all, end-all, especially to get started. They have many of the co-branded airline cards that are essential, like Southwest, United, British Airways, and they also have their proprietary points are called Ultimate Rewards. And these are the absolute most valuable points, in my estimation, because they are transferable. Okay, so what that means is these points sit in your credit card account, but they have 11 transfer partners, airlines and hotels, which means at any given moment, you could transfer these points to United, Southwest, Hyatt, British Airways, and then a whole list of Singapore Airlines, Korean Air, and we'll talk about that a little bit later. So those points are ultra valuable because they are essentially miles or points in those 11 programs at any given moment.
And I think one of the reasons that it's really cool that you're listening to this podcast is if you just haphazardly got into travel hacking and were doing it without a strategy, you could be too far along to go back and collect some of these. And I would say that even some of the people that are the best known people in the space wish that they could go back and do it slightly differently.
Yeah, I think Jonathan's exactly right there. And the reason why this Chase Gauntlet exists is Chase now has a rule that is loosely known as 524. What that means is Chase will deny you getting approved for a new credit card if you have opened 5 or more credit cards in the prior 24 months.
And it's not just Chase credit cards, it's any credit cards.
Correct. So that's any credit cards from any bank, including, and this is important, including authorized user cards. So for instance, what my wife and I used to do was I would open up an account in my name, let's say the Southwest Premier card, right? I would add Laura as an authorized user, and then we would both put our normal spending on there and hit the minimum spend and then put the card down. And then in that case, Laura would open up a Southwest Premier card. That's another crucial point, is that each person can open up a card in their name and social. So that's important, just kind of a sidebar. But in that instance, for my account, my Southwest Premier, I would get one card against my 524, and Laura would get one card against 524 because she was an authorized user on my account. So that incentivizes you to not add authorized users at this point. That is now a losing strategy.
And it used to be a winning strategy because you could get an extra 5,000 points if you did that. So that is, if you're listening to this beginning of 2017, this is the place that you want to start. The way that we're walking you through it now would be the perfect way to get involved in this. And it's always changing a little bit. And we'll try to keep you posted as we find out what new stuff is available. But right now, beginning of 2017, I believe that the strategy we're about to unpack is the best one out there. The Chase Gauntlet is what we're calling it. And one other thing I wanted to add on to that, Brad said you're limited to 5 and 24 months, and he kind of tiptoed into the second half, which is if you're married or doing this with a partner, it's actually 10-24 because you can get one card for you and then get one card for them. And then we're not talking about authorized users. We're talking about alternating, opening the card in your name and then opening one for them. So this strategy, this 5-24 is really a 10-24 strategy. And this is a lot of travel miles. This is a minimum of 500,000 travel miles that you're going to have racked up by the time that you finish this over the next year or two.
Yeah, for sure. And that should be bare minimum $10,000 in free travel. So we're not talking about small change here. And again, to tease Jonathan's example, it's going to be significantly more than that. It's going to be closer to 18,000. So let's get started. In our opinion, the best way to get started is with those Chase Ultimate Rewards points. All right, there are a number of credit cards. And again, as Jonathan said, we're recording this on the end of January 2017. So please keep in mind this could be different when you listen to this sometime in the future. But the Chase Sapphire Preferred card is probably the number one card right now. This gives you a 50,000 point bonus. We're not going to go through every single detail of every single card, but there's another card called the Chase Sapphire Reserve, which is the number one card when it had a 100,000 point bonus, but that's down to 50,000 now. So many people would argue whether those are 1 and 2, but I think it's hard to go wrong with either of those. It's kind of outside the scope of...
I think that's probably digging down the weeds a little bit, but we do need to discuss annual fees because we haven't really talked about that. But one of the reasons that the Chase Sapphire Preferred is such a nice card to begin with, a lot of these cards have minimum spends, which Brad talked about, but they also, in many cases, have annual fees. The Chase Sapphire Preferred is no different. It has a $95 annual fee, but that fee is waived for the first year. And so it's a free card. And I don't think you can beat that.
No, I agree. And not to get into the weeds, but the Chase Sapphire Reserve has a $450 annual fee that you have to pay that very first month. Now, there are ways to get much of that back, but still, for most people, literally paying out $450 in an annual fee is very difficult to get over.
And daunting if it's your first card that you're starting with.
Yeah, agreed. I would not suggest that for anyone. So anyway, there are a bunch of these cards. There's a Chase Inc. Business Preferred card that I think most people would say would be in a top 5. There's a bunch, as I kind of alluded to, there's some Southwest cards, there are United credit cards, a British Airways card. So you very quickly can arrive at 5 Chase cards that you want to and need to get as part of your first 5. Because as we said, if you don't open these, if you intersperse them with a couple Amex cards or a Capital One card, you are then at 524. And at that point, you are not getting any more Chase cards. So that means you cannot open a Southwest. You cannot open that United card. So you're locking yourself out of these cards and these big bonuses. Whereas if you opened 5 Chase cards first, then you can move on to those Amex cards and the Citibank cards and the Capital One cards. So in our opinion, the way to go is to maximize the Chase 524 or 1024, as Jonathan said, for a couple, and then move from there.
I've spent a fair amount of time considering how I would do this if I were starting on January 1, 2017. And I want to run my ideas by Brad and see if he agrees with me and how I would go about this. So we just decided, number one card will be the Chase Sapphire Preferred. I think that is an absolute fantastic pick for the first card. It has I believe a $3,000. It's $4,000 minimum spend that has to be achieved within a 3-month period. Once you're done with that, I probably would go ahead and do that one for your spouse or partner as well. So that would be your first 2 cards.
Yep, agreed.
Okay. Now, 3 and 4 are debatable, and you can, mix this up depending on what your goals are. But if it's early in the year, so if it's December or January, I would start working on the Chase Southwest cards, especially if you do a fair amount of domestic travel. The person who travels more frequently domestically should be the one to apply for this 2-card sequence. And I would start with the Southwest Airlines Rapid Rewards business card, which currently, and it changes, right now has a 60,000 point bonus. And then I would follow that by the Southwest Rapid Rewards Plus credit card. And they have a third one. It's interchangeable. I would look at the bonuses to decide which is better. When the bonuses are the same, I would just pick the one with the lowest fee.
Yeah, and I would go with the Plus because it does have a smaller annual fee.
Okay. Now, I would not open 3 Southwest cards. Just do the minimum to get your companion pass. Brad, you want to talk a little bit about this holy grail?
Yeah, so the Southwest Companion Pass, as Jonathan said, is loosely known as the holy grail of travel rewards. So what it does for you is it gets you your designated companion can come with you for free on any Southwest flight that you book. That's whether you book it with regular cash, you pay for it normally, or you use points. Okay, so that essentially doubles your value of any Southwest points that you have.
And how many points is a domestic flight?
So, I mean, they can vary. I've certainly seen Southwest flights as low as 5,000 points each way. I've even seen flights from Baltimore to the Bahamas for, 5,300 points. So, I mean,
wow.
Yeah, I mean, these points can go a significant way. And basically how you earn the companion pass is you have to earn 110,000 Southwest miles in 1 calendar year. Okay. So in this case, as Jonathan said, the Southwest business card currently has a 60,000 point bonus. The Plus card has a 50,000. So right there, that's 110,000. Now you'd have, with the minimum spends, you'd have about 115,000.
And they're actually lower minimum spends, surprisingly.
Yeah, they're only, I know
2 and 3.
The Plus is 2 for sure. So the business is 3. So right, you had 115, and that would immediately trigger the Southwest Companion Pass. Okay, so it's important to note that one person, okay, this is not an instance where you could get the business card and your spouse could get the Plus card. One person needs to earn 110,000. And the cool thing with the Companion Pass is once you've triggered it, it's good through December 31st of the following year. So now this should be ringing alarm bells for you, which is, okay, it's January of 2017 now, or February when you're listening to this. That means if you got moving on this immediately, you could get the Companion Pass for 22 or 23 months, which is unbelievable. Yeah, buy one, get one. I mean, Vegas, anybody? I mean, you can go anywhere in the United States and you can take that extra person with you. Yep. And you can have that for 2 years. And it doubles. So it's essentially like having 220,000 Southwest miles. Yeah, and by the way, you still have the 110,000 points that you earned when you were getting those. So you didn't have to use this. So you're not trading in 110,000 for the Companion Pass. It just triggers that benefit for you. So you have those 110,000 to use, and you get a free companion on every single flight you book with them. So you can see why that is. Jonathan would consider that the next set of cards to open after the Sapphire Preferred. We're going to continue going through his plan. I think it's going to depend certainly on your travel goals, just like anything. We're not locking in and saying this is the perfect plan for everyone, right? If you live near an airport that has 0 Southwest flights, the Companion Pass is not going to be great for you, right? If you are planning on flying to Zimbabwe, like my co-host here, the Southwest Companion Pass is not going to help you at all. Right. So it depends on your timeline. It depends on your goals. But I think for many, many people listening to this, the Companion Pass is going to be the highest value thing you can do with your miles. Yes, absolutely. And I think you can have an intellectual debate about the order of these to some degree. I think that number one, the Chase Sapphire Preferred, is kind of locked in. I went back and forth, and it would 100% be based on what my travel plans are for the next 2 years. If you're in a place where you want to make a bunch of domestic trips, which I think probably most of us are, if I were speaking to the majority of America, they mostly are making domestic trips. I think it makes sense for that to be there. And if you're married, I think it makes sense for you to do it one time for the one person and not to then repeat it for your partner at the same time, unless you have a big family that you're traveling with. Yeah. No, that's absolutely right. So you might space it out and then come back to those later on. Yeah. So kind of moving along, I would personally focus, and Jonathan has this on his list here, which is going back to the ultimate rewards points. So now there's a card known as the Chase Inc. Business Preferred Card. And now you've heard us mention business cards, right? We mentioned the Southwest Business and the Chase Inc. Business Preferred. Now, there is a very loose definition of what constitutes a business.
Yes, Chase is not the IRS.
They are not the IRS. You do not need a registered business. You don't need an EIN. You don't need payroll, anything like that. There are many articles of what constitutes a business for a business credit card. It could be something as simple as babysitting, as simple as having an eBay store or selling on Etsy. So
maybe you're walking dogs.
Right. So loose definition, it's not our place to say whether you should or should not apply for a business card, but many people without registered businesses get approved for these cards. So we'll kind of leave it at that.
And one of the things that we're going to be talking about is why you need a business. Starting a business is very important for everybody. You know, it doesn't matter if you're going to become Steve Jobs, but there are a lot of benefits to starting a business that you may not have considered. And, you know, actually, this is pretty cool. Applying for that business credit card was one of the things that pushed me into actually starting Choose FI.
Wow. That's very cool.
I signed up for that Choose FI credit card long before I had a business model. I just had an idea and I applied for it and they gave it to me. And then after I had it, it was kind of empowering that now you have a business credit card. You now have a business. And you know what? I built a real business around it.
Yeah, that is amazing. That's absolutely amazing. So, just kind of moving on, you know, we would probably go for the Chase Sapphire Reserve next. Like we mentioned, it has a $450 annual fee. There is a way that you get a $300 travel credit per calendar year. So very likely you can cut that down to $150 or potentially $150 to the good if you got the $300 in travel credit in 2 calendar years. So again, beyond the scope of a 45-minute podcast, certainly, but don't throw out the reserve card just because it has that big fee.
Right.
You can be smart about it. So then...
And also, you should know that a lot of times we're repeating these for our spouse in many cases.
Yep, correct. So, right, both those cards that we just mentioned, all 3 of the Ultimate Rewards cards, we would definitely repeat for the spouse.
So if you are following my template currently, 1 was the Chase Sapphire Preferred, 2 was repeating it for the spouse, 3 and 4 was the Chase Southwest cards, 5 was the Chase Inc. Business Preferred, 6 was repeating that for the spouse, 7 was the Sapphire Reserve, 8 was repeating it for the spouse, and then, you know, just for completeness, we rounded out 9 and 10 by doing the Chase for the spouse as well.
The Southwest cards, yep. So that would be when your original companion pass was getting ready to expire. Your spouse could go for one then and get it for another 2 years. So we can debate these cards. I think for Jonathan's particular instance, I would argue that he should go for the United cards. Okay, so United Airlines, there's a personal and a business card. I think there's, just based on what I've calculated in my head while we're going through this podcast here, he could get flights to Zimbabwe indefinitely, forever. 2 of them every 2 years, they could fly to Zimbabwe for free if they just kept rolling through the 3 Ultimate Rewards cards we mentioned and the 2 United cards. So I think that's a model he can replicate forever, essentially.
That's very cool. That's great. You know, and just on the list that we came up with, and that could take you 2 years to run through, I would think, because there's a lot of spending that would go on, but it's just your normal spending. But that's going to provide you with 710,000 points, which if you're maximizing those the value of that, I mean, what's the value of that?
Yeah, I mean, that, you know, at 2 cents per point, that's $14,000 in free travel, and can be much, much more than that. So yeah, I mean, I would say at minimum, that's 14 grand in free travel. And because of that 524, if we just wanted to talk about this, so if Jonathan wants to do his Zimbabwe trip, which again, I'm kind of teasing it too much here, but you know, if he just wanted to stick with these Chase cards, he could do that 524. He could go through those 5 Chase cards and then just do it again 2 years down the road.
Yeah, that's cool.
He could reapply for those cards. That's kind of the limit on Chase cards, is you can get the bonus every 24 months. So it's 24 months after you last got the bonus on that particular card. So just using this hypothetical, Jonathan could take those 5 cards, the 2 United and the 3 Ultimate Rewards cards, and just keep rolling through them and open them every 2 years. He would, by definition, be under 524, because every time he got back to card, he would be back at 424, because that last one would have rolled off, because it would have been more than 24 months ago. So this is kind of hard to see, not on paper, but this is something he could keep doing indefinitely.
That is just, it blows my mind. Essentially, just by me listening to that single podcast 8 to 10 months ago, it gave me a $10,000 post-tax raise a year, essentially. And wow, you know, you could have been watching your episode of Friends just over and over again, or I was watching Seinfeld last night, Or you could listen to a podcast and you just pick up this one life hack and then you figure out how to implement it into your life. And now you've got a $10,000 raise.
It's unbelievable. And I mean, in this instance, Jonathan was going to spend that money out of pocket. This is not like, oh, we might go to Africa to go on a safari. This is, we're going to Zimbabwe to visit my wife's family.
Yeah.
We are going.
We are going.
It is a guarantee, right? Jonathan's going to have marriage issues if he doesn't go.
It would be extremely messed up for me not to make that a priority for our family. So
without a doubt. And this is an instance where that line item on his budget, which was $3,000 a year, because he figured they could only afford to go every other year. So that's $6,000 he had appropriated for flights to Zimbabwe, is now cut down to $200, because that is, as we're going to see in a few minutes here, those are the taxes and fees that he needs to pay out of pocket for. Instead of it being $6,000, it's going to be $200. So I mean, that is unbelievable.
So maybe we should just tell people, do we need to talk about how to use your Chase Ultimate Rewards points? Is that?
Yeah, I mean, I guess we can quickly talk through that since we've made Chase such a priority here. So you have these Ultimate Rewards points, and like I mentioned earlier, they sit in your credit card account. Okay, so you go to your what's known as the Ultimate Rewards portal. Okay, and there are three main options on how to redeem these points. We'll go from the worst to best, essentially. So worst is just trading them in for cash. So it's 1 cent per point. So the 50,000 points you would get as a typical bonus would be worth $500. Nothing to sneeze at, certainly, but we're going to do much, much better than that with our options 2 and 3. So Option 2 is to book your travel through the Ultimate Rewards portal. So Chase has their own little travel search engine. They probably piggyback on Travelocity or something like that. But, you're just plugging in, hey, I want to go from Washington to Zimbabwe. And they show, okay, that's $3,000. And they kind of tell you how many points that cost you.
And this was the first rookie mistake I made when I did my first redemption. And it wasn't to Zimbabwe. I had a wedding. And just as a sidebar, that's something that most of you, even if you're not international travelers, should be able to relate to, because the average cost to travel to a wedding in the United States, $600 per person when you add in plane flights and hotels and all that stuff. And so I had a cousin that was getting married in Georgia, and we wanted to go to the wedding, me and my wife, and we went to the Ultimate Rewards portal thinking that's how you redeem the points. And it's a win and a lose story in that this is how I used them. The flight would have cost us $400 a person. I was able to use my single bonus, my 50,000 point bonus, and I was able to redeem it on the portal for both 2 round trip flights for both of us and a rental car, a really nice one for the entire weekend. And that was great. But if I had heard what y'all are about to hear right now, I could have done even better than that.
Yeah, and that's an important point also, which is sometimes your travel just works in where you can't quote unquote maximize these miles, but Jonathan just saved a boatload of money on a trip that he was going to take anyway, right? So I don't want to get into the weeds here and say, okay, you can only maximize them. You're crazy to not transfer them and get 3 cents per point or something, some nonsense like that. You need to look at what works for your life. Okay, so that's an important sidebar. But let's move on to option number 2, which is booking through this portal. So if you get a little bonus, and it depends which card you have. So if you have the Sapphire Reserve, the one with the $450 fee, you actually get 1.5 cents per point when you book through the Ultimate Rewards portal. So that means that 50,000 points would be worth $750 in free travel. Now, the other 2 cards, the Ink Business Preferred and the Sapphire Preferred, get you 1.25 cents per point. So that 50,000 points would be worth $625 in free travel when booked through that portal. So that's an instance where having the Sapphire Reserve is very valuable. And the cool thing is you can combine all of your Ultimate Rewards points into the Sapphire Reserve to make them all the more valuable, 1.5 cent per point.
That's a pretty cool technique.
Yeah, so that's just something to remember. Now, the third and best option, in my opinion, is to transfer them to travel partners. Now, I mentioned this earlier. There are 11 transfer partners, and I get the most value personally out of United, Southwest, Hyatt, and British Airways. And now the cool thing is these points transfer in most cases. I think it's 8 or 9 of the 11. They transfer instantly to the point where it's literally 15 to 20 seconds. Like you'll go into your Hyatt account, you'll go into your Chase account, you'll send over some points. You'll literally hit refresh on your browser and the points will be sitting there. So that kind of tells you should only transfer these points at the exact moment you are ready for them. Okay, that is a crucial point. because once you've transferred them, they cannot get back. They cannot get back to Chase. So all the flexibility and all the value is having them sitting there in Chase where you can send them out to those transfer partners when you're ready for them. So don't transfer them early is the quick tip here. So now what that means, and I think this is probably a good segue to talk about Jonathan's actual trip to Zimbabwe.
Yes.
What that means is in many cases, you're going to get better than 2 cents per point in value. So that's kind of my benchmark where should I use Ultimate Rewards points is if I'm getting 2 cents per point or better, that's a pretty good redemption in my opinion. You can see why that far outpaces the cashback at 1 cent per point or even the 1.5 cents per point of the Ultimate Rewards portal if you have the reserve.
And the only one I've done up to this point was the Ultimate Rewards portal for that wedding, and I got 1.25. And at the time I was happy with that, and I'm still happy with it. But as a learning curve, if you're coming into this today, you should really lock down that 2 cents per point.
So that's, again, not a hard and fast rule, but just kind of a back of the envelope. Just remember that. It's 2 cents per point. So you'd want to get $1,000 in value out of 50,000 points. All right, just remember that. So literally 2 seconds before we started this podcast, what we did was we talked about the Zimbabwe trip. And if Jonathan came to me and said, hey, Brad, how would I do this? So I have, in his case, I have a ton of Ultimate Rewards points. What do I do? So I
have 310,000 right now.
Nice. Yeah, that's a great starting point. So my immediate response was, let's head over to united.com and let's check it out. Now, I know that United is an alliance partner. Okay, they're a star alliance partner of South African Airways.
Yes.
So that was my original thought was there's a decent likelihood I know for a fact there's a South African Airways flight from JFK, and I'm pretty sure there's one from Washington Dulles.
There's definitely one from Dulles.
Sweet. So this is just in 5 seconds of thought. Let's go check that, right? Because we know that United is one of the transfer partners of Chase Ultimate Rewards. So let's kind of test this out. So we just simply went to united.com. And I mean, no joke, Jonathan, right? We did this in 20 seconds.
This was 5 minutes.
Yeah. And so you just go to the main search box. In our case, we just typed in Washington, D.C., and we plugged in Dulles, so IAD. And then Jonathan, through the airport in Zimbabwe, the code was HRE. So we just did that. And then just real simply, I clicked, my dates are flexible. Because, in this case, Jonathan just wants to get a free trip to Zimbabwe. He doesn't care if he goes on July 4th and comes back July 11th.
And it's January now, so this is in October. I can make my plans around whatever comes back.
Yeah, exactly. So we plugged in October 2017 and clicked search for award travel, and then just let it rip and click search. And the United computer just thinks for a minute, and what it does is it comes back, in this case, since we did my dates are flexible, it comes back with a 2-month at-a-glance calendar. And in this case, there are little symbols on here that denote whether there's availability or not to use your miles. And we're looking for Savor Award Economy. And literally every single day in October and every single day in November of 2017, there is a Savor Award availability to Zimbabwe, which is unbelievable. So we just randomly clicked on a date, and I would suggest kind of just clicking through the dates. For Jonathan, in this case, you might find a flight on the 12th that's slightly better in connections and time than on the 15th. You just don't know. But you know for a fact that there is a Savor Award Economy on those dates. So it's just kind of trial and error from there. So we just literally clicked on, I think it's the 19th here, right? And we scroll down and we see very simply it is 40,000 miles. And actually on the way out, it's $5.60. So to fly from Washington, D.C. to Zimbabwe, it would cost him 40,000 miles for each ticket. Okay, so for him and his wife, it's 80,000 miles and $5.60 for each ticket, or $11.20.
I have a permanent smile on my face when I see that.
It's unbelievable. I mean, it is as simple as that, right? So we literally just clicked, and it took 1 minute. And then we saw on the way back, there was similar availability every single day. The tax is a little bit higher, and this is where I said the $200 before. Depending on which country you fly out of, it looks like the African countries are charging about somewhere between $60 and $100 in taxes. So that's per person. So he's looking at 80,000 miles per ticket, or 160 total, which he has from Ultimate Rewards. He almost has enough for 4 tickets, actually, since he has 310. And about somewhere between $70 and $110 in taxes and fees.
So I basically already have all my points racked up for us to go 2 different times.
Yep. For the next 4 years, he's good to go.
Good to go for the next 4 years.
Yep.
And that is right out the gate how I saved 12 grand in travel.
Yeah, it's unbelievable, right? So just from opening a couple of cards that he mentioned, in the Chase Gauntlet here, he has enough for 4 round-trip tickets to Zimbabwe, which would cost him $12,000 in after-tax money. That is as big a win as you can come up with.
And travel hacking is not designed around making it to Zimbabwe. I'm probably the only person listening to this that needs to go to Zimbabwe. The places that you can go are amazing. I mean, you have so many options, but it just gives you a level of freedom. I mean, it's so cool to now not think about going to visit family as making a choice between my financial future and going to see, family who I love. Instead, this is a way I'm gaming the system and I'm going to get to do this for free. And this is going to be fun.
Yeah. Oh, without a doubt. I mean, it's certainly fun. And just to kind of mention what Jonathan was saying, which is he might be the only person listening to this going to Zimbabwe. But if he can get to Zimbabwe with 3 minutes worth of work, I mean, no joke, we spent, honestly, under 3 minutes doing this. You can sure as heck get to Florida. You can take your family to Disney World. You can go to California. You can go to Hawaii, right? I mean, these places are simple to get to. If he can get to Zimbabwe, you can get anywhere you want to go to. Europe is simple. What we kind of talk about is flexibility is very important. So I kind of brushed on this earlier, but if you can be flexible with the dates, that is really, really crucial. If you try to shoehorn this into your normal travel, like, hey, I need to go, and you want to do it on holiday weekends, you're going to be frustrated. But if you're someone like Jonathan who said, hey, I'd love to visit family this fall, you can do it very, very easily.
And we're just going to tack on a few other redemptions that a lot of people enjoy using these. And, we're going to kind of wrap this up. Costa Rica.
Yeah, so Costa Rica is actually something, I didn't mention this to Jonathan, but it's a trip we're planning on taking, actually.
Oh, okay.
So I have real up to the date knowledge on this. So Costa Rica is very, very easy to fly to. Southwest flies to Costa Rica. So Southwest, in my opinion, is the easiest of all the frequent flyer reward programs to use because they don't have limitations on their award seats. Whereas people talk about blackout dates, right? You've heard that term a lot. And there's some validity to it, but what it usually means is there are a finite number of award seats on every single flight, and people book them. So it's not the airline's job to give every single, 200 seats on an airplane to frequent flyers. They might allot 2, 5, 7, 10 seats, whatever it is, right? And people book them. Okay, so that's where flexibility comes in. But with Southwest, it's just a simple function of their cash price. All right, so for families, Southwest is going to be the easiest to use because, generally, A, you can use the miles, and B, the flights are pretty inexpensive, so they're not going to cost a ton of miles. So that's why I usually kind of focus on Southwest, and that's why we talked about the Companion Pass earlier. But Southwest is a nice, easy way to get to San Jose, Costa Rica, and there are a couple of neat redemptions. I think the Hyatt. So I think it's the Andes Hyatt, which is one of like their little chic brands. My wife Laura and I have stayed at the Andes Fifth Avenue in New York City, and it is just the best hotel we've stayed at. We absolutely love it. It's a perfect location, and we've used our Ultimate Rewards points, as we mentioned before, to transfer them to Hyatt. Now, that's like a luxury redemption. Could we have found a better way to spend our 20,000 or 25,000 Ultimate Rewards points than a night in New York City? Yes, we could have, but man, we thoroughly enjoyed it.
Yeah.
It's right there in Midtown. They give you free wine at night, which is super cool considering it's New York.
I mean, and you're an accountant and it's a game and it's a math problem. I mean, what is this trip going to actually end up costing you?
Yeah. So, I mean, the Costa Rica trip would have been, I don't know, $4,000 easy for the 4 of us. But, we can just send our Ultimate Rewards points to this Hyatt. And it's actually only 15,000 points a night, which is really, it's one of these, I guarantee you, in my opinion at least, that this is going to go up in category. Okay, so it's going to cost more than 15,000 points at some point in the future. It's generally when you find these little deals, actually in the last 12 months, my wife Laura and I and our family, actually, we stayed at 2 of these Hyatts that had these super deals. We found one in Asheville, North Carolina, which is just a really cool, hip, liberal city. It was only 5,000 points per night, and that jumped up, I think, 2 categories, and now it's like 12,000 a night. So that was like a little sweet spot. And we stayed in one in the San Francisco Bay Area that jumped up like the week after we booked it. So we found 2 of these sweet spots. I guarantee you this Hyatt in Costa Rica is another one. If we wanted to stay 5 nights, it would be 75,000 Ultimate Rewards points. We'd just zip over to Hyatt. We'd book the nights. Simple as that. We have Southwest miles, but if we wanted to transfer them over from Ultimate Rewards to Southwest, we could book that too. So, I mean, just from having these Chase points, we have an entire trip to Costa Rica, just like that.
Yeah. And then you can go to Hawaii.
Yeah, Hawaii is obviously another big destination. There are a bunch of sweet spots, and I just kind of alluded to this in the Hyatt conversation, but sweet spots are generally when you can find some kind of, almost kind of like game the system a little bit. It's usually using a partner's miles to book a flight. So for instance, we mentioned with Zimbabwe, Jonathan can use United miles to book a South African Air flight, or in his case, it might be Ethiopian Air. It's any alliance partner you can use the miles of to book on a flight of another alliance partner, as long as there's the award availability. So in this instance, there are a couple of sweet spots to Hawaii using partner miles. And in this case, you can get them all from Chase Ultimate Rewards, of course.
Coincidence.
Yeah, what a shock, right? I mean, you can see we're not in the bag here for Chase. Chase is not paying us for this, certainly. But these are the best points. They simply are. There's no other way to get started other than with Ultimate Rewards.
You know, I was talking to someone at the mustache camp that we were at earlier this month, and her name's Marla, and she is just a redemption expert. And she was telling me one of the things that she does with her friends and family is once she decides what trip she wants to go, she plans it all out, and then she gets one or two of her friends and she just advises them exactly what sequence of credit cards she wants them to open, when they need to have it done by. And she just does it all for them. And then after they've done those steps, you know, maybe a year ahead of time, she just maps out the whole redemption. And it's really nice to go to one of these places like Hawaii or Asia, Philippines, Costa Rica. But how much cooler is it if you can go with your neighbors or your friends? And how much cooler than that is it if you've been able to help them hijack this whole experience and do it for free, and you're just kind of gaming the system together?
Yeah, I mean, that is awesome. And yeah, Marla is fantastic. She was one of the best people I met at Camp Mustache. And yeah, she is a wizard with redemption. So hopefully we can get her on in the future to kind of talk through some fun trips she's taken. But yeah, just to quickly finish with Hawaii, there is you can use British Airways miles actually to fly American Airlines and Alaska Airlines. And it only costs $25,000.
Wow.
British Airways miles to fly round trip from the West Coast. And the West Coast is important there. It has to be there are about 10 to 12 airports that you can fly from the West Coast to Hawaii for only $25,000 round trip. And now compare that with the standard award charge for American, United, and Delta is $45,000. So that's kind of the baseline. So that's when we look at a sweet spot, we look at the baseline. In this case, it's $45,000. If we can get it for fewer than $45,000, we have a sweet spot. Okay, so clearly $25,000 is one of them. British Airways, as we said, is a transfer partner of Ultimate Rewards. Now, Korean Air is random. You would think, what would I ever do with Korean Air miles? Well, they are a SkyTeam partner of Delta, all right? And there are lots and lots of Delta flights. And if you can find a Delta Level 1 Saver flight, you can actually use Korean Air miles to fly to Hawaii. And it only costs $25,000. And that's regardless of what part of the country. It's not just the West Coast. Okay, so Korean Air actually just added a functionality where you can search for this on their website, which is actually very useful. You had to previously call, and that was just a big disaster. So $25,000 round trip to fly Delta from anywhere in the U.S., and I think it's actually only $45,000 Korean Air miles to fly first class in Delta. So
that's cool.
Which is unbelievable.
So it would be 80,000, you would think, one way.
Yeah, it's incredible. So I mean, that based on the baseline, right? It's 45,000 in economy normally for Delta if you had Delta miles, but it would only be 45,000 round trip for Korean Air miles in first class on Delta. So I mean, that is the ultra sweet spot. And just finally, you can also use Singapore Airlines miles to fly United flights, okay, because they're a Star Alliance partner. So it's using these partners, and that costs $35,000 round trip. But United availability is pretty plentiful. So even though that's more than the $25,000 we mentioned previous for British Airways and Korean, it's still a nice sweet spot that I've seen a lot of people use. So Hawaii, if you have some flexibility and you're not going during the summer, going during the summer is going to be difficult, but because everybody's going there. But if you have some flexibility on dates and times, Hawaii is a really, really simple one to get to, and that's a big dollar savings.
And you can also use some of the same tactics to go to Europe from the East Coast.
Yeah, that's absolutely true. So yeah, similar to the distance from the West Coast to Hawaii, It's actually almost identical using British Airways miles from the East Coast and even as far west as like Chicago, using British Airways miles to fly their partner Aer Lingus and Air Berlin to a lesser degree. There aren't as many options to Europe. Okay, so this has changed a little bit recently, but it's still a huge sweet spot, and it beyond the scope of this one podcast, certainly, to talk about all the details of this system. But the baseline is normally 60,000 miles round trip to fly from anywhere in the U.S. to Europe. Okay, so 60,000 as our baseline. You can now get these flights on Aer Lingus from, I think it's 6 or 7 different airports for only 26,000 miles round trip in what's known as their off-peak time, but that's like almost 2/3 of the year. So that's less than half. You're getting a 50% plus discount.
There's a lot of numbers being thrown out, and I realize that. But one of the cool things that you should be thinking about is when you're starting with the Chase Gauntlet and you're building up this arsenal of these ultimate rewards points. And if you remember right now, I said after a year of this, essentially I have 310,000 of them. Those transfer 1-to-1 to a lot of these other partners. So just when you hear him say the points with our airline, for the most part, with maybe a couple of exceptions, we're going to be able to transfer the arsenal of Chase points that we've built up and then use them for some of these expensive trips. So just to run through what we've said so far, Costa Rica, Hawaii, Asia, Europe, there are so many options.
Yeah, you can fly essentially anywhere you want. And within the U.S., we're not trying to be snobs here. You have to go somewhere exotic. You just want to go to Florida, right?
Yeah.
You can easily do that. You can fly in Southwest. They fly into Orlando, a ton of places, Fort Lauderdale. So this is not the first class high flyers society here. This is just, we want to take our family on a vacation to Florida. You can easily do that. So please don't think we're being snobs here at all. This is, if you want to take yourself, your spouse, your family on 1 to 2 free vacations or nearly free vacations, because you're going to have to pay some ancillary fees. But if you want to take 1 to 2 nearly free vacations every year, you can do that with Travel Rewards. It's as simple as that.
So in an hour and 3 minutes, we basically summed up this game for you. And we've given you an outline of what we would do if we were starting from scratch, how we would do it, why we would do it, who's it a good fit for, who should avoid it, and then kind of giving you the long-term vision of how you can actually go about redeeming these points. So the next step is you would just need to get started. And if you want to get started with us, we've actually created an entire section on our website for learning about travel rewards and actually starting to open up some of these cards if that's something that you're interested in. You can go to choosefi.com/009. That'll take you to this podcast episode. You can also go to our experiment section and go to our webpage. It's called Travel Rewards. And on that page, there'll be a link to our cards page, which you can actually get started with the Chase Sapphire Preferred if that's what you want to do. And we hope this was helpful. Any final thoughts, Brad?
No, I would say just listen to this podcast. Listen to it again. Just really take to heart that this is real. It's very, very easy, and you should get started, in my opinion. I think this is one of the lowest hanging fruit items in the personal finance world, honestly. This is a $5,000 to $10,000 raise just by being a little bit smarter than the next guy.
And nobody looks at this as personal finance. This is personal finance. I had to make that trip. I had to budget money for that. And now I don't. And that directly affects my ability to take that $6,000 and put it into an investment account, to put it into starting a business. I mean, those are real dollars behind that. And we think this is the untold story.
Yeah, it's so powerful what Jonathan just said. And this is the low-hanging fruit. If you're looking for actionable items from this podcast, which is what we want to get across, get started. Listen to this podcast again. Take it to heart. Read our pages, choosefi.com, and we're here to help. So we probably, in all likelihood, will do future episodes on travel rewards. And this is the way to get started.
You've been listening to Choose FI Radio Podcast, where we help middle-class America build wealth, one life hack at a time.